Hello everybody, this is the voice of Snail, and I'm going to lead you in a little watercoloring tutorial on how to do a sea turtle. We're going to use a different technique today than what most of you are probably used to. If you'll notice, I went in and drew on top of this after I did the painting. That's what all the little swirls and stuff are done with a Sharpie after the fact. So, if you can see, we're going to start with this kind of like oval shape. So, what I have is my paper that I have taped down with some simple masking tape. And I am using a watercolor paper, but the masking tape keeps it from buckling. Then I have just your basic messy looking elementary school watercolors. I'm going to put those over there. I have a little dish with one simple paintbrush. I also have a paper plate over here. If I want to thin out a color, I can also do that in the lid of my watercolor tray over here. So I'm going to get some water. I'm going to put my water on top of my plate. So, I'll get some water. I'm going to start with getting all my colors wet. I'm not sure what colors I'm going to need, but if you guys are using a liquid watercolor, your colors will already be wet. You won't have to worry about this step. And then, watercolor is just a matter of how much water you thin out your colors with. So I'm going to start with green, because that's how I did this one. I did like a really light green to start with. So I'm going to bring that color up to the lid and make a really thin green and water it down. And I just want enough so that it's lightly tinted. So when I'm doing my little water splotches, I'll be able to see them on the paper. So let's get some water up there, a little bit of green, a little bit of green. Now, if you're going to imagine an oval, and I'm going to start by kind of planning out my oval. And I'm just making little dots to kind of help me along. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw this out into a line. Draw that out into a line, into a line. We're just going to make kind of like dashes. You're going to need that little white space in between each dash so that when we come in a second and add some color to our dashes, then they'll be all ready. So I'm going to take a little tad bit of blue and add it up here to my lid. I don't know if you can see that. Up here in the left hand corner, add some more blue, some more water to that blue. I'm going to take it from the deeper part of the blue. So if you have some watercolors, see now when I touch this, you'll see how that blue like spreads across the color a little bit. I'm just touching it on one end very lightly. You can touch it on one end or this end or that end or both ends, and it's making the frame of your turtle, his shell or her shell. So now you have this beautiful outline for a turtle. Now, I always do the things in the middle next, because you have these strange kind of like hexagon, some of them, or octagon shapes, and they all fill in. I start right behind where the head's going to be, and I come up with this long shape, and then I stack, kind of like stack the rocks first, and then I fill in with the other pieces. So if my head's going to be up at the top of this frame, I'm going to grab some of that green, and I'm going to make my long block of color. I'm going to make a long block of color, Maybe make it a little pointy on the sides, bring it out. So like a long rectangle with pointy ends. Another long rectangle with pointy ends. Make that nice and wet. Get that water in there, because you're making little puddles. Little puddles of water. Now, what color should we add to those? I think in my original one, I added some brown. So I'm going to come down here and grab some brown, put it up here on my tray with just a tad bit of water, because I want that color to be a good solid brown, and I'm going to touch it. Watch it dance. Whoa. It's going to spread across that. And you can even come in here with a, help it along. There's like a little white bubble right there. I'm going to help that along. You can help it. I'm using the opposite end of my brush because it doesn't have any paint or bristles on it. So just kind of pushing it along. It's like, come on, brown, come over here. There we go. There we go. Now the reason why I do the coloring right away is that once those blobs of water dry, then the color won't spread as easily. So you want those blobs of color to still be nice and puddly when you go in to make that. I'm working around the camera here, so it's hard for me to see. Now I'm going to go in and fill in these gaps with little shapes. And they're just going to look like triangles with maybe a round side. Oops, I touched that one. You can see how that brown is coming into there. That's alright though. It's a happy oops. Happy oopses. Here's another one. But notice how I'm trying to keep these colors, these puddles, from touching each other, just so that they're nice little puddles. Let's see. Now what I can do is I can come in with a little bit more green if I think that the color's not dark enough, and just tap a little bit on a corner. Tap a little bit. Tap a little bit in the corner. It kind of gives it a little bit more definition too. If you can experiment with that on your own paper. Just have fun. And I think maybe some brown. Where's my brown? A little bit up there. Tap that into the side. Boop. Boop. So much fun. Okay, now I'm going to give this guy a head and some legs. I'm going to move my paints up a little bit. His head's going to look like kind of a rounded triangle. Just a little head sticking out the top of his shell. And for a sea turtle, the arms are kind of like wings in a way. If you want to look at this, it's like giant thumbs. But they're like fins. They help him swim in the water. And then he's got a tail too. So let's work that little tail in first. I might not be able to put a leg too much on that side, but that's okay. Because art has no rules. That's what makes me happy about this particular type of project. It's like you can set your own rules, make your legs however you want them to look. I might set a little bit of a line over here to indicate a leg. And this one, it's got his arm coming down. Get some more of that green up there. I might need to make a little bit more green. There we go. Make that little arm. Doesn't have to look like fancy art or anything. I try to make it as even as possible. Starting him at the leg. Then, let's see, does he need some brown on his skin? Or maybe even some darker green? There we go. Sometimes I like to put the color in right where the edges might be a little faint, and that way it shows some definition of where that leg is supposed to be or where that arm is supposed to be. And now when you come back in, we can do all kinds of other things. We're going to wait for this to dry, and I'll probably come in and do a little fancy, I like to draw the outlines around and just kind of a messy little, you know, squiggly with a thin Sharpie or something. And if you see, I did some kind of like wrinkles on the inside of the legs. You can see how I made the under part of that arm way dark on this one. I had a lot more room on this paper. Now what we can do with ours is add a little bit more background color. So I'm going to beef up that blue over here. We need our water. So you can just come in and fill in. Bring it all the way over to your tape if you want to. And like I said, try not to touch where you've painted previously, and that way your colors won't bleed into each other. Get that painted in there. This painted up here. Boom. Now if there's any part that you want to go back and see, that's the beautiful thing about having this on video. You can always pause this and go back and look at, maybe you wanted to make yours look more like my original one. You can do that. You see how I made it lighter right here with the watercolor in the background, and then drew the darker swirl on top, just like a snail shell type of thing. So I'm going to go in with some darker blue and make some splashes here and there. Because, you know, this turtle's swimming. It's making some waves going through that water. Seeing things, checking out the world from the fathoms below. There we go. Now we will go in and detail that with a marker, and maybe I'll include that with a photo a little bit later. This has been Snail coming to you on behalf of the Girl Scouts of Northern Indiana, Michiana. Thank you for joining me. Happy swimming!